Excel fee sheet that they fill out to communicate all those fees. They scan that into Decision Pro, and then that is just manually looked over by the LPC later, where they're hand keying that into Laserpro. So it's not like it's efficient right now either.
Okay, so for compliance concerns, it's really the data transferred into Laserpro, right? Not necessarily the tracking.
So making sure all the necessary questions can be answered on the front end on a TRID loan. And so when Chris might be able to speak to that as far as like from the compliance side of things, but just being able to make sure everything we need to answer on a TRID loan can be expected and answered in Sageworks, and then how could that easily move over to Laserpro to produce those early disclosures?
Okay. Yeah. So my kind of plan during this call is to show you, because the first call we did, you guys kind of walked us through, shared your screen on what your process to a 30,000 foot level process. And so what I will show you also is kind of the steps inside of Sageworks at a high level, what data you capture at the application, and then the automation that once the application is submitted, that will start that workflow process, which is basically the review of all the data that you captured, as long as with some due dates to make sure that you're within the time frame that TRID requires, but then also kind of the task tracking to make sure that you're covering all the bases for the information you need to capture for TRID, whether it's HMDA, just the standard 6 pieces of information to start TRID, and just everything related to that. And then after that, I know one of the topics was the process for adverse action. And so I can walk through at a high level that process, one way that it can be done in Sageworks. And again, everything I'll show you, this is how it worked for when I was using it at my institution. It can be tweaked and customized to meet the specific needs to any institution. And that's what I've been doing in some of my other implementations that are using our system for TRID related loans as well as their standard loans. But mine is a little more detailed because I'm very detail oriented. So you'll see when we get to the workflow, it's very in depth, and it doesn't have to be. I just kind of want to have a little asterisk there so that you're not overwhelmed by all the information. It's completely customizable. I just wanted to get everything on there so that you can see all of the detail for new users, so that they don't, or new employees to your institution, so in case they've never processed a TRID loan. So this is kind of at a high level.
Okay, and just keep in mind too here, guys, as far as approaching our Nebraska friends with something like this, we'd be approaching mostly people who are very experienced in TRID loans, and they are looking for detail to get some real assurance that this would even be possible. Otherwise, the ownership for the bank, they're looking to people like Peggy Brennan to tell them if it would work well for their TRID loans or not. So just keeping that in mind. Anyway, the folks looking at this are pretty in depth.
Perfect. So, Jared, do you have anything before I kind of walk through what we had talked about showing?
I think we're good.
All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm also going to take my camera off while I'm sharing, just so I don't see myself in the reflection. Perfect. Okay, so can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. And I'm going to...
I was going to say, before we get started,
yes.
Nick, I was going to ask you, Nick, do you prefer they hold off on the questions, or do you want them to ask questions as we go throughout? How do you prefer?
So I'm very informal. Please interrupt me so that you don't forget your question, and so that I don't forget something I may have shown you while it's happening. So just interrupt me at any time a question comes up. And I'm not going to show you every step on like how to start the work or how to start the application. I'm really just going to kind of start in the application, unless you would like me to start from like step 1.
No, Brian, I'm good with
No,
Getting past the initial app piece,
Okay.
we've already covered that.
yeah, I'm
part.
good with getting past it.
Okay. So basically, once that borrower has that, this is a replacement of the 1003. So you're going to be capturing the basic loan information in this section, as well as any of the other 6 pieces of information. And some of the information I've added on here, as you'll see in this section below, this is all hidden to the borrower. So this is what we call our lender view only. So I can see this because I'm inside the system, but a borrower that is accessing this same application portal cannot see this. And this is a section that a lot of times loan officers don't get right, or it's not captured up front. It's normally captured later on, but to kind of help to for the HMDA tracking to stay on top of it, I've added basically 6 questions in here that can give you a high level view on if it could be or 100% is not going to be HMDA reportable. And based off of these questions. So the loan officer would come in here, and if they selected no to all of these, then this is going to trigger a phase inside of the workflow for HMDA for the compliance team to review to check all the boxes to make sure that if it is HMDA or not, and if they need to track all the information. And so,
And Nick is
yes.
so this is great. That like a list of these questions are we able to configure them that they're required to answer for every lender?
Yes. So originally I had everything required, but I didn't want to have to go through and fill out everything. I wanted to be able to talk. But normally everything on this
Yeah.
is going to be required.
Okay.
So once
Yeah,
I
just
fill
making
out,
sure I'm on the same page there.
yes.
So Nick, just curious, were these questions then something that you created, or is this the standard way that the Sageworks goes about determining whether or not a loan's HMDA reportable or not?
No, so these were questions that when I was at FineMark, I met with my compliance team. I'm not a compliance officer, but I worked with our compliance officer to come up with generic questions that you could know the answer to up front in the initial intake or collection of the data phase, so at the application phase, and at a high level to where the loan officer is going to be able to know the answers to this without trying to get too detailed. So these questions, if any of them are selected yes, it is 100% not HMDA reportable. But if it doesn't mean that if all of them are no, it's also 100% HMDA reportable. It's guaranteeing that you need to take a second look at it, and the loan officer may not be the right person to take that second look. There's a safety net in here, but this is custom information. So now I'm going to continue to the primary borrower, and this is very similar to the 1003. It's just a different layout, obviously, but all the data that I'm collecting in here is very similar. So the first question to get that joint intent information is going to be right here. If I select yes, then there's more detail in this level because of this being an electronic application. So by having them initial and select the number of borrowers, as well as type out the full name, it's confirming that they are acknowledging the additional borrowers. And then when they actually e-sign the full application in the disclosure, the terms and conditions, there's a section in there relaying back to the joint intent, because you do have to have separate acknowledgments from joint intent versus just the overall signature. And again, I'm not going to fill this out, but as I go through here, again, these are all standard questions. You have your email and your phone, and I like to keep them on separate tabs so you don't have to scroll down and you see all of the information. If the borrower has a different mailing address, then there's logic flow in there. And then there's these declarations. And so these are, again, they match to very similar to the 1003. And if the borrower answered no, nothing happens. And again, these would all be required. But if the borrower answers yes on any of them, then it would require them to provide some information on that response. And so this is a custom section that I actually recently built. And so it's a personal financial summary that includes the monthly cash and income, their assets and liabilities section, and there's logic built out so that they're only seeing a couple of sections, and then as they go through these other sections, if they answer no, nothing appears, but if they answer yes, then a section appears, and they can select the drop downs that they have. So whatever that reason is, if I input that information here, it'll auto calculate the totals. And that does that for these sections as well. And then there's this credit authorization as well, so that upon submission of the application, I can automatically pull their credit if I choose to. And this is also all of these total up as well. And then the final piece. Yes.
No, I was just gonna say that looks really smooth. Nice.
Thank you. There's so to be able to get this done, it's all custom like coding. It's JavaScript coding, and it's not true like computer coding, but it does take some in-depth configuration. But that's kind of what my team does. That's how we help guide our institutions through that implementation. So then the final piece is the demographic info. This is similar to to the demographics form. It's just obviously not going to look the same. And I have it on here. We do have a HMDA module inside of our system. And you do have the ability to actually send a demographics form, a PDF version to the borrowers to fill out and sign, and then it'll automatically index it in the document library. But this I built in here so that it can be captured at time of application. And if you need to have it separated from the application for whatever reason, then you can always print the PDF and only print this page or export this page from that application. But all of the data is identical. I mean, I copied and pasted the disclosure and all the information up top from the 1003. And another piece of this, so you'll notice where it says lender use only on each one of these sections. That is only for this method obtained. So if I was the borrower, I would not see this section where it says method obtained. All I would see is the header and then these options. And the way these work is they're not required because you don't have to provide one of these informations. You can always select I do not wish to. But if I selected yes, Hispanic or Latino, then it's going to give me the option to select a drop down. But let's say I'm not Cuban, Mexican, or Puerto Rican, and I click other, then an additional box with descriptive words in here to kind of help navigate which, I mean, you should know your ethnicity, but it's just as a safety net. But then if I select one of these, nothing appears. Same thing for this section for race. They will not see this information, but then they'll see all of these drop downs. If I select one of these, I base it basically identically to the 1003. So if they had different selections you could have, then I added those. If there was a text box, I just placed a text box in there. And then again,
if they selected, I'm sorry, what if they selected Hispanic, but they don't want to select one of the subcategories? Because that's one of the rules with HMDA is you can provide those additional subcategories if you want, but you're certainly not required to do so. So when I say I'm Hispanic, but I'm not going to fill out anything else, was that one of the options to just leave it as is? Like, can they move on without selecting the subcategory?
Yes. So if this was a live application, then I'm not going to have this page required. Everything else is going to be required to at least acknowledge either yes or no, but the demographic info tab, nothing's required on it. So I could leave it blank, or if I selected yes, I could then move on and continue, or I can select the drop down. But I don't have to do anything on this page. And if I didn't, then when it was submitted, the loan officer, when they were reviewing all of the application information, they would just come to this page and they would select one of these method obtained options and finish filling it out if the borrower left it completely blank.
So we're talking then for like an online application, if the customer said, you know, I don't want to fill it out at all, they leave it blank, it's going to allow them to proceed and eventually get to the lender then?
Correct. Because that's
If we wanted to change it to not that we can force them to provide their ethnicity, but at least to ask them, did you not want to provide it? Can we do anything? Is there any customization there that we can do to say, look, we want them to say they didn't want to provide it, yes or no? We can at least ask that question or force them to answer it. And if they didn't, they wouldn't be allowed to proceed. Is that something we can do, or is that?
Yes. So all of this is completely customizable. You can leave. So let's say they selected yes. That's not required. But since they selected yes, now it will be required for them to select something from the dropdown. And you could add a dropdown saying, I do not wish to provide. Or they could just select this option, I do not wish to provide.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So that is all the borrower information. I'm going to skip through. We don't have a co-borrower guarantor, but basically it is all of the data on the primary borrower data collection piece, just duplicated to each one of these additional sections. The last piece is the collateral, and it's very basic, but I've consolidated the collateral type list. So these are, if you have a Laserpro connection, this dropdown would populate with the same collateral type as Laserpro, and you can hide collateral types that you don't want visible for an application type. So because this is specific for TRID, I just have the handful of the residential real estate collateral types. I'll select that, and then here is where I would put an address, and then the collateral owner, which is the primary borrower. And then I'll just put in an estimated value. And then again, property address. Typically what I do is based on the collateral type selection, I will make these 4 fields required. And you can also have, if they have a real estate agent, or if they have somebody that is going to be the contact for an appraisal, they can provide that information here. And this would typically be required as well. So once I go through there, I don't have any documents that I request up front. I'm already collecting the financials on the personal financial statement summary at the borrower level. And other than that, I normally request my documents after application, so I know what the details are, so that I only have to reach out and touch the client once to make sure that it comes across like I, as the loan officer, know what I'm doing, and I don't have to go back to them a second time for additional information. So once I do that, if this was a live application, I would submit it, and it would send for the application for signatures using Adobe eSign to the borrower, and then it would submit the application after it was signed. But because it's not live, I'm just going to click select application or submit application, and it's going to verify everything. If there were required fields, making sure that it's required. Again, I don't have any required fields though, and then it'll be submitted. So at the very beginning, before I started this application, I selected who the loan officer was, and I selected my name. But when I select that loan officer name, and then when I submit the application, I automatically get an email. Well, I get 2 emails. The first email is going to let me know, because I was the loan officer, that there has been a workflow that automatically started when this application was submitted. And I'll know which one it is because it'll have that information, and I can click directly on this link to take me to the workflow. I'll sign in and then it'll take me to the workflow. The second email that I would receive, and I just received these within 10 seconds of the submission. These are for that workflow, but these are all of the steps that are now available for me to work on automatically. And this might make a little more sense when we kind of transition to the workflow, but I wanted to show you how quickly I'm notified as soon as a TRID loan is submitted. And when I was at FindMark, I tested this at least 300 or 400 times. And with every single one of them, I received emails and the workflow automatically started within 10 to 15 seconds every time. And so we used the application like submission date as the workflow start date because it timestamps it also. So if I had this application link on my website and a borrower submitted this at 5:01 p.m. on a Friday, but we close at 5, I have a timestamp to justify, well, now I have an extra day to start TRID because we were closed. It wasn't during business hours. So now my timeline doesn't start until Monday versus having to get everything out by Tuesday. On the application, does anybody have any questions? And I'll take silence as no question, and I'll move on to the workflow.
Any feedback? Does this work for y'all? What you've seen so far?
I always get excited to see any sort of fluid workflow process like that happening in there, but I don't have any questions so far.
And all of the information that I have is not set. Like those were just the data points that I wanted to collect to add to this template, and that were very similar, if not identical, to the way I built it at my old institution. But you can add any field that's inside Sageworks, plus you can create your own. So those HMDA fields, the demographics, all of those are custom fields that I created just to be housed in the application so that I can collect that data up front. Other than that, I'm not using them, but they will stay with for the life of it.
One question I had real quick on the customizable fields, is that something that, eventually, if we ever got to the point where we were doing that, is that something that Bank of Colorado staff has the capability to do? Do we have to communicate with Sageworks, and what does that process look like? Because there's always things like that I'm sure we're going to end up wanting to tweak, and I was curious how painful that process is to get that customization completed.
So the big difference with Sageworks versus a lot of other competitors, and the FindMark looked at CreditQuest prior to Sageworks, and the biggest difference was the ability to self-configure and self-maintain the system during and after it was being implemented. Our goal at Abrigo and Sageworks is not to hold up your process and if you want to make a change to your system, you have to reach out to us. That defeats the whole purpose of creating those efficiencies of your origination process. So during implementation, myself or somebody on my team, while building the system, we show you how to configure it and customize it so that in 8 months after implementation's done, you could come to this collateral page, and let's say you wanted to rearrange it or add different fields. You click this Work with Collateral Fields button, and you can edit the existing information. You can come down here and add brand new collateral user-defined fields, and it's all real time. And unless you had an issue or forgot how to do it, that would be the only reason you would have to reach out to Sageworks. And this same process you are able to do that on the loans page, the collateral page, the deposit page, the customers page. Like on every different module, you have the ability to create custom fields, because the fields we provide you, it's gonna check all the boxes, but they're more generic and default fields that you typically have to capture, not the more granular information that is going to be specific to each institution, because every institution provides their service in a different way that's specific to them. That's might be relational versus more of like just like you don't even know the client's name, and so you have the ability to completely customize based on your internal process. So once the application is submitted, I know where to go, but a new user would get that email and it would direct them directly to this page right here, to the workflow page. And so now I need to refresh the page, but now this is really where the trade process, and just for any origination, this is where the meat of it is. This is the checklist, or the different process so that you can make sure you're checking all your boxes, that everything that needs to be done for your origination is being completed, and you can hold your staff accountable, because when it's completed, it'll timestamp with their name, date, and time, and only the people that are assigned to a specific role are able to complete a step. So if I wasn't assigned to this lending team role, this would be grayed out and I could not work on it. Typically, when you are in the workflow, you have to come in here and assign the specific roles per workflow. But the way I have this set up for TRID, because I don't have time to do that because of the time sensitivity. So what I did at FindMark and what I've done in this example is I created a team or a group. And basically, this worked for FindMark because the structure was in the 12 or 13 offices they have, every loan officer has their own credit analyst and their own loan coordinator, their loan coordinator or processor or admin, whatever you want verbiage you use. And so I created a group for every single one of them. And so it was time consuming. But then I also created a TRID disclosure prep phase for every one of those teams. And so instead of loan officer team, it would have said Nick Caddy's team. And these phases have logic built in them. And so let's say there's 24 of these different TRID phases based on each loan officer. There was logic that said, if the loan officer is this person, and this is a residential real estate loan, and the collateral type is X or whatever, then insert only this one. And so the system will automatically run through and only include this TRID phase. And it defaults the people that are assigned to it, so that's why I automatically got this email, because I was pre-assigned in the template. Whereas normally in a standard workflow, you would come up here and select the different people and then save it, and then they would be emailed. So we've cut out a potential miscommunication or delay of getting started on prepping those early disclosures. And so this TRID phase, this is really the, I guess you could call compliance checking, or just really making sure that the application that was submitted, let's say you forgot to make field required. So you're in the workflow, but you want to, before you start preparing the documents, you want to make sure that the borrower provided you that information. And so rather than having to go navigate through the system and go look at the application, there's a step in here that tells me, as the loan coordinator or loan admin, to go prepare or create a boarding sheet and for me to review the 6 pieces of information. So the step says run residential real estate boarding sheet. If I click that page, it's going to take me to what we call our standard report. And I can create my custom boarding sheet for this specific loan request. So you have to put in a couple pieces of information, like just you have to name the report. And then I have examples, but this is the boarding sheet I'm referring to. So after that, the only item you have to select is the loan that's in focus, which is this first loan. So once I check mark that, it will default check the collateral that was tied in the application. And then I scroll down here. I don't care about financial information because I've already captured it in other fields. And at this time, I just wanted to make sure that this is a tradable loan. So now I click Save and Continue. From there, I have all of the basic information. So for the borrower, obviously it's not filled out, but if it was, it would run through their information. If there's a guarantor, a proposed loan, and collateral. So I have that up on the screen now. So now I can go back to the workflow. I could check off that I completed that. But here is really where I'm just confirming, okay, do I have the borrower's name? If I click print, it'll do a full screen of it. Okay, do I have the borrower's name? Nick Caddy. Okay, cool. I have that. So income, yes. Social, so on and so. I can go through and individually check these, or I could just mass complete the whole thing, and it'll timestamp and everything. And so now I know it's TRID, and you'll notice all of these steps have due dates on them. So I structured this to be this entire phase. You have to have everything completed within 3 business days. So if I'm looking starting today, I think I have it set for 4 days because it really should be the 16th, because if I'm looking at my calendar, today, tomorrow, Monday, but you can set it up so that it is 3 business days. And so if it's not completed by then, there's not anything that will happen. Like there's no safety net to automatically create the documents for you, but it's a way to track and to hold your users accountable for, okay, well, why didn't you get this completed in time? You knew when it was due, because if you don't finish it by 11:59 p.m. on the 17th, then you can set it up so that the manager or whoever the individual is gets notified that there are tasks that are past due. And if you see that it's TRID, well, that's a red flag. And so this is great for auditors to use, because we gave our auditors access to our workflow, because that was our new, we used to use accordion paper files, and then we transitioned to just the workflow as our file, because you can tie documents directly into this workflow, and they're all tied at the workflow level, so you don't have to leave this page to view anything. And they had access to here. So it was a blessing and a curse, or a double-edged sword, because they could see who did it and when it was done. So there was no way to buffer the timing restraints that you have. So after I go through here, I'm not going to go through and complete all this stuff. I just wanted to kind of give you a high-level view of how you can go about doing it. But the next piece is to verify compliance items. So this is more compliance specific. So the application received date. These are all checklist items that you will do, but in this comments box over here, you can actually select, okay, because this is your electronic file, if I put this right here, then this lives with this workflow forever. So now, okay, I've done that. How was this received? Well, it was done over the internet. And then if it's a HELOC, so on and so forth. But let's say it's not a HELOC. So I can check mark these, and I can either waive and it'll timestamp it, or I can just delete it and then it removes it. So I'm only looking at what's applicable. And so an appraisal disclosure step. This gives you the definition of what it is for those users that they may be new to your institution. And this is just as a reminder that this is required at time of application or within 3 days of application if it's not in person. Okay, cool. Is GMI required? So this just gives you a definition of what Reg B and Reg C are. And I mean, like you said, Stacy, your users are more seasoned, so this probably isn't relevant, but just you can add information in here to help make sure that there are no mistakes that are happening, because at the end of the day, a system can't fix mistakes. Those are human error. But you can put safety nets and things in here to help prevent that, so that there's no excuse on why something happened. And so if it is required, then you'll see that it says, if yes, refer to hum to face, which we'll get to in a second, and that's down here. But I want to, so after you go through and make sure that this is completely all TRID, it's all TRIDable, and this is a TRID loan. I've verified all of that information. So I completed those tasks. They disappear now, but they're not forever gone. It's just as you complete, you want to, the point of the workflow is to complete the steps so that there's nothing left. The next step is to now assign the loan number, because since it's TRID, you have to do it early on. And then the next step, because you have all of the pieces of information you need to prepare those disclosures, you have this step to prepare and finalize disclosures. And there's a note to export to Laserpro. So if I click go to page, this is going to take me to the Laserpro API page. So I select my loan, and then it's going to give me all of this information is mapped to and from Sageworks, so, or to and from Laserpro. So I have my main, all of my codes from Laserpro flowing into Sageworks. So I'm selecting the same thing. So I'm selecting my product, that the way that I have it set up in Laserpro directly in Sageworks, so I don't have to do it twice. So let's just say it's a 7-1. And the loan policy type is residential real estate. So ideally, all of this information is going to be filled out. But if it's not, then I'm obviously for this example, I'm not going to fill it all out. But so then I fill out the loan information. Then I fill out the borrower information, and all of the CIP information for the borrower does flow over, but it just doesn't show it on this page like it does on the loan, because it's standard information. So your social, date of birth, address, phone number, email, all of that. And then the collateral, same thing. So it's going to ask you for your configuration set up in Laserpro, and then it'll pull over all the fields that you have based on these categories in Laserpro. It'll pull the corresponding fields from Sageworks into Laserpro. And we have, I don't know if we sent it to you or not, but we have an Excel sheet that shows every single field that's mappable from Sageworks to Laserpro.
Okay. No, I didn't get that, but
Okay.
yeah, you guys said you had that.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so now what I would do is I would click export to Laserpro, and it'll give me a document record number. It probably won't work because I don't have Laserpro on my computer. But let's say, okay, perfect. So it gave me this transaction number. So then I would go into, pull up Laserpro, and I forget the exact process, but you would go to the toolbar and search for a transaction number. I think it's similar to what you guys did for Decision Pro into Laserpro. That process we watched. Basically, you have this number, and I would type this into Laserpro, and then it'll pull up that transaction. And before I move forward, I'm going to click the toolbar and change it from closing mode to application mode, so that I can prepare those initial disclosures. So now everything's in Laserpro. I don't want to complete this step though until the documents are ready and they're completed and ready for the loan officer to review. So once that's done, then I would complete that. And now I have it set up to where the loan review team gets notified because I completed that step, and they can either go into Laserpro to review them, or I would have uploaded them to the workflow and they can view them directly here. Once that's completed, then I, as the admin, would get notified again so that I can move on in the process to actually get these sent out to the borrower and provide how the method of delivery, when it was done, the toolkit, everything. And so this checklist is available at any point in time as soon as you start the workflow. And it's just so that mentally you have a checklist of, this is everything that could possibly have to be given to the borrower in that 3 days. So you can either do it as you're coming through and completing these steps, or just as a review once you're done before you email them or send them for signatures to make sure you have everything. So this HMDA reportable section was automatically inserted based on those questions I answered. Again, the first step is to review that initial decision by the lender to make sure that they did it correctly. If that is correct, now you input and track the HMDA information, and there's details on what the process needs to look like. So you input all this information and it walks you through the steps. And then the final step is to export the CSV file into your LAR platform. And then there is a step to remind you within 30 days before quarter end to record the data based on the regulations. So that's the TRID process. I know I took up a lot of time, but I want to make sure I cover questions on that before I go over at a high level adverse action, or I can do that first.
I don't know. I guess Stacy, how would you envision? I mean, I guess this process is kind of like, I don't know, a combination of what maybe the branch would do and what the LPC would do. I mean, do you like how that works?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, most of this would be the branch, other than, well, yeah, actually, I'm just thinking like in terms of for Nebraska, a lot of this would be the same parties. You have a lender and a loan assistant sitting there helping enter or helping fill out some of these details, and then they're getting into Laserpro to produce the loan disclosures, and they would be the ones coming along here then to mark off those steps as far as finishing up HMDA or any of those other questions. Okay. And actually, so Nick, touching on transferring this data, or well, so back at your prior bank, transferring a loan like this over to Laserpro, did you see, like, as far as the connections, and like, did you see most of the fields get transferred over to Laserpro? Like, more specifically, when you're trying to prepare these, maybe not even so much the loan estimates, but like, say you get to the end, like a closing disclosure, would all the fees be communicated over from Sageworks? Like somewhere the branch would enter the fees, and Sageworks and those would transfer to Laserpro?
Yes, and so we at FindMark use Laserpro to input our fees. But I haven't updated my workflow to show the enhancement of our fees inside of the system now. And the way that we can do it is you can add your own custom fees and your own labels and the way they're calculated. And those do flow to Laserpro from Sageworks.
Okay. Because there's a lot of questions right now the branch is answering. So besides our manual fee sheet, though, there's plenty of those fields that I can imagine like Nebraska would be concerned about if they didn't already ask, as far as like the branch needs to spell out the disbursements and all those title company fees. And then how flexible would the setup be if maybe we had a loan with 2 or 3 properties involved on it?
So the process is all the same in the workflow. The only thing that you would have to do is you would probably want a review section for each collateral versus just having one collateral section checklist. So what you would do is you would insert an additional collateral checklist phase so that then you can have a timestamp of each property being completed.
Okay. Sure. And not that we have that a lot, but actually a lot more than I thought we would, having 2 properties involved. Okay.
And so again, this is completely customizable. The way it worked for me was to have all of these tasks in one phase. But if you would rather separate to have your Nebraska office only see certain stuff, but then the back office see other stuff, we can separate them, but then they would both appear based on the same information, but you're not intertwining the steps of it, so it doesn't look so convoluted. This is one way of probably 1,000 ways you can do it, but this was the method that we used at my bank, and it worked for us. And we processed, I mean, our portfolio was majority residential real estate, and we didn't sell to the secondary market. They were all kept on in our portfolio so that we could, because of our close touch relations with our borrowers, so that we can make easy modifications and everything. So we didn't even need a 1003, but we wanted to make sure to have it a consistent process with the industry standard.
Okay. And for the sake of time here today, Brian, did you have any other questions on this part, or could we move on to the letters?
One question I had real quick, Nick, on the HMDA piece, does the user end up entering most of the data manually? For example, let's say debt to income, loan to value, credit scores, or does all of that get recognized by the system and it auto populates it based on what's entered in building the loan, or is it just a big manual dump into completing those fields for HMDA?
So if you have I don't know why this isn't working. If you have the fields in the application, they're all available in the application, and if you have the borrowers filling out the HMDA specific information, then yeah, once the data is input, once it flows everywhere. But at some point in time, I mean, there has to be a record of that data before the data can actually flow, right? So it doesn't matter who inputs it, but at one point, the first part is going to be inputting the data.
So if the credit score is pulled in through the application, then it would be there, correct?
Correct.
If that service coverage ratio is calculated, it would be there, correct?
Correct.
So the answer, I believe, is yes.
Yes, but it's all about how you would configure the application. So if I requested the stated income and I input that, and if I was automatically pulling the credit score when it was submitted, it would itemize all of the credit score debts plus take in that proposed loan amount and do the calculation for the DTI and DSCR.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. And so the adverse action piece, again, this is a way, in my old life, our adverse action process was terrible. So anything was better. And so this is the way that we did our process. We tracked it in the workflow. So let's say we made it through all the way to this application phase. Pretend it's not a TRID loan or whatever. So we got through this application phase, and this is where I realized, okay, we are denying this loan, or the borrower backs out because they went somewhere else or the contract fell through, whatever. So what you do is whatever the last phase that I left off on. So I finished at this application phase. I select this drop down for insert a phase, and I pick if it's a deny or withdraw. So I'm going to select deny. That will automatically, it already has me defined as the loan officer in here, and it has the steps. So the first thing I need to do is contact the client. Well, let's say the client's the one that reached out to me, or I've already done that. I can complete it. Then I just have to make sure that each data point has been completed, And I know that it has been because we just did the application. And so the next piece to this is to now complete the denial credit memo form. So if I click this go to page link, it's going to take me to the page to where I would select, so this is the primary borrower, let's say, and their financial information would be here. And then I would scroll down here and I would pick my adverse action form. And I would click run credit memo. I would select the loan that I'm denying, and then I would click run credit memo. And so what this will do is it will create a Word export that will automatically fill in. And this, again, this is an older form because I don't have the joint intent information that I captured at the application. I don't have all that. But every field on here is mapped from the system. So I'm not having to input anything here. All I'm doing is creating this adverse action form, and I can set it so that it's on my bank's like internal header, and everything would flow into here. And once I reviewed it and everything was done, and again, I just picked something, so I didn't fill out anything, but all of this, I mean, this is what I used. So all of this information flows in. Like you'll see that I have in this template and the ampersand because I have it mapping over the primary and any additional borrowers if it's applicable. And it adds in their income, if it's business, their revenues, DTI, DSCR, everything. And then all I would do is click this Sageworks tab and click upload to document library. And it's going to tell me, okay, I'm going to relate it to this loan, to this workflow. And I don't know if I even have this set up for, but normally I would have this document defaulted to a denied form. But so let's just say that's the denied form. And I'm going to come in here, click save. And now I could print it if I wanted to, if I was going to email it, or I can just exit out. Then I'm going to come back to this workflow and I'm going to say, okay, I completed that. Boom, we're good. So then it's just making sure that the other steps we had our compliance officer review to make sure it was good. And then you would mail the adverse action if applicable. I would deny the loan, and then the workflow would close. And that denied form automatically shows up on this page. And if I wanted to click on it directly from here, I would be able to see the denied form. So the reviewer doesn't have to leave the workflow page. So at a high level, just as a time summary or time, that is the adverse action phase, process, whether denied or withdrawn.
And Nick, you were saying that so that letter or template, basically, we could totally configure any of those fields we want to show up on that letter from the sounds of it.
Yes. So that process is I normally use it for a credit presentation, but you can use it for anything you want, any type of template that you want to use. So that same process, I built this for a credit presentation. It's just a Word document, but I've created many templates specific to what I wanted them to do. Because all it is you just format this template and then you save it, and you save it so that people can't make changes to it. They can just run or create a credit presentation from that. And we call it credit memo, but it's similar to a mail merge, to where you can map anything that is on any one of these tabs into that document. You can make the background of the page purple if you wanted to. You can do anything you want.
Cool. And then I think, so Brian, if I'm clear, one of the just one of the complaints from Nebraska then was if they have to complete the letter in here, that they would have to manually select the reasons for the denial, right? Versus having it just automatically populated like we have with Decision Pro.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think we might have, I don't know, I think we showed you last time that the system generates those turn down reasons automatically and just automatically populates into a letter that we just print and send out. So it is a little more work, or appears to be a little more work doing it the way that you're doing it. Can you remind me how they know? Is it they just have to know what reasons to pick just by they're looking at the results of the underwriting, or is there flags that are like, does the system flag things that are outside of policy and then they can pick those?
So it's the most of the time, and I don't know why my loans page isn't working. It's been happening with mine, but you have a specific drop down list to choose from, and it's a generic. And there's no automation to say, okay, if it's this, then this, but in the workflow. But we have what it's called loan decisioning that will basically run a recommended denial or approval or whatnot. And that is where you set up your policy parameters. And if it's not within this, then it recommends denial. So then this would automatically be added and you wouldn't have to go through the process. You would just basically be solidifying that you're tracking that you sent a denial out, but the loan's already been denied. Or you don't even have to do it in here. You could just do it through loan decisioning. And because it creates its own summary page with the reasons of why, because you've built the template for it.
I see.
And in Laserpro, how would Laserpro know the reason?
Laserpro wouldn't, but Decision Pro does. But keep in mind too, Brian, when you're using Suntel doesn't have a denial, so we're doing that, through factual data. So it doesn't auto-populate the denial reasons. Then if we lost that functionality in Sageworks, from my perspective, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, normally you've got, between 5 and 10 denial reasons that are commonly used. The lender better know them, and selecting that's not a big deal versus, again, having the system select it for you.
Yeah.
But
No, and
it depends on the loan type. Because the consumer loans are done differently than the commercial, and I don't know how Nebraska does their denials, but
yeah. No, I mean, I think that I agree with you. I mean, I think we're a little more flexible with being able to figure stuff out. I was just thinking of our Nebraska friends, But is there any way, and I don't know if I'm sure this would involve just another quick call, but to see that loan decisioning piece, just so I could I just have a hard time wrapping my head around so we have it all programmed in there. You run a loan through, it says decline or whatever. And then, is there one set up in there?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think if I've done. Let's see.
In the demo account, we do have scenario it's set up to do it, but you're not doing that.
So if I come in here, and again, this is just an auto loan, but
Okay.
it's all the same. It's just whatever you put on here. So all of this information is custom. I chose to have this information in here for this template.
Okay.
So it's going to have all this information. You can add narrative if you want to, and it'll have all the data and everything. It'll populate, but you can have all of this automated. So when it's submitted based on specific criteria, you can have it auto generate, and then you would receive a notification to say there's been a loan decision that's been made, and it'll take you just directly to this page right here, and it'll have this form with all of the data in here.
Okay.
And then and here are the metrics the criteria that I set up to allow the loan to be recommended for approval or denied. And I can directly approve it from here, or I could deny it. And then I wouldn't have to go through that manual process.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Chris. I don't think that's that big of a hurdle to probably change to do it that way. From what we're doing.
Because what I've seen before is in the workflow, there's a step in the down here, like in the loan and underwriting or financial analysis, it'll say run loan decisioning, so that it's doing that back of the napkin high level before you dive in and actually spread everything.
I see.
So it's again, you're using the workflow as your home page, and then it's directing you to that decisioning page.
Okay.
That's one way I've seen it used. So then you're still able to input that adverse action to track it, because this is your file, but you're not having to manually choose anything, or you can deny the loan directly from this page, exit out, and then come back here, and this wouldn't be there. That would already be done. So you would just run that credit memo, and then you would close the workflow.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very customizable, which is fantastic. But for institutions, it's ever changing. So the possibilities on how you configure it is endless, which sometimes can be overwhelming. But if you have direction on how a process has worked inside the system, then that's a starting point to then kind of stem out from there to see how it could work specifically for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Does anybody have any comments, questions, or anything?
Stacy, you got
That looks
anything else?
good.
I was going to say maybe.
Gerald, I don't know if we wanted to, I think with Nebraska, one thing that might help them is if we had, at least in the compliance side, if we had the ability to talk to a compliance officer at a bank who is currently using it, because there's always going to be, these calls are good and informative, but there's always little things that, in an hour call you just can't do.
Right.
So if we wanted to actually say, okay, I want to talk to a compliance officer at a bank that's been using Sageworks for a couple of years, and let them give me an unfiltered review of what it does well, what they struggle with, what are the growing pains, somebody that's comparable to us. Is that something that is feasible? Because again, I think Nebraska is that might go a long way to helping to sell them on something like this.
Yeah. Let me work on that, and maybe Nick, you could help me in that area too, because I know this area of your focus. Let's get back with you on that. Talk to banks that have been using this way, and get back with you on that. Also, I was thinking that if there's recommendations before we again show them anything, if there's anything, if you needed Nick to show something that we weren't able to show today, maybe just kind of say it'd be nice if we could actually see that, or something we couldn't see. Just let us know, and if it's possible, we'll try it out. But yeah, let me speak internally, and in general, we were talking about references, but this is something more compliance oriented. So let me focus on that portion and get back with you. Today's Friday. Can I maybe reach out to you within a week giving us time to reach out and get in contact with the institutions.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine, and I don't know if you need to jump on it right away. I'm just thinking long term in this
Oh.
process. I'm not sure how long it's going to play out, but that's something that, even for myself, I'm pro Sageworks, but even then, I'd still like to,
Oh.
what are we kind of expecting? It just, I think the reality is when you see little bits of it at this stage, it looks good, but there's always going to be the growing pains, and it's nice to get that unfiltered opinion from somebody else that says, look, we've been using it. We know how it works and what the weaknesses are and what the strengths are of any system. And here's what you can expect. And again, I think with the compliance people in Nebraska, that, I don't know if we've got it, like, if you need to set up something immediately, because I don't know at what point we're bringing Nebraska back into the loop on this anyway. But
Well, we're going to try to do it pretty quickly. I mean, I think the sooner the better, probably.
Brian,
and if that's
do you think we're at the point that this is something that we're ready to show them, or do we need to work on make any modifications to what you saw today?
Well, I'm just trying to think. I mean, we may want to just go a little bit deeper into the. I mean, I think from the TRID and the compliance stuff. I mean, yeah, that was. I think that's fine. I think if they have any questions on because I don't know, I can't remember, Gerald, how far we got into the just the underwriting piece, past the point of when we talked about the decline letters, it all kind of fell apart or whatever at that
Right.
point.
Well, I think we were great during the underwriting piece until we got to compliance when the wheels fell off the bus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the underwriting part, I think everybody really liked that, and until we got to this part, and so.
Okay.
But I made a recording of this. I'm gonna send it to y'all. So if y'all wanted to take a look at it again, critique it, say, well, maybe we want to focus on this, or you might say it's good enough. I mean, Nick, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you bringing your real life experience to Sageworks and kind of letting us know the capabilities that even some of our people didn't know we had. So I appreciate that. And
yeah, of course. And again, so this process is not foolproof, and this process isn't going to may not work how it is for any other institution but the one I was with. And so that is, I always like to say that because I can't speak to how it might work for you. I just know how it worked in real life for us, and it was better than how we did it before.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing
I appreciate that because I think just knowing that it works is the biggest step. I mean, as far as Nebraska was concerned, and I think that, I mean, I like the process and I like knowing how somebody else used it, exactly how they used it. So I think that's very helpful. Thanks.
Good. And one thing I do want to point out, the other solutions that you're using, I don't know how much they've evolved in the last 5 years, but our solution, is constantly evolving. It's evolved just, Nick, you could, the enhancements that are being released in 3 weeks, right? So you're seeing something that in a year and a half may completely be even much more dynamic than it is today. Because it is something that is it's at the president's desk, right? So if this works for you today, it'll be even better for you tomorrow. So point that out. All right. Well, why don't y'all maybe get together? Can I maybe put a time on the calendar for me to reach back out to y'all sometime next week about next steps?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, let me get I think Stacy must have dropped, huh? Let me get with her, and Chris will talk a little bit. Send me that recording, and we'll look at that, and then we'll definitely get back to you quickly. And
I was going to say, coincidentally, I am going to be in Fort Collins on.
Sorry, I do have to drop. It was nice talking to you guys.
Nick, I'll let you go.
Thanks, Nick.
I am going to be in town next Wednesday if you wanted to hook up while I was in the area.
Let's see here. Let me check with Stacy and see what works.
All right, sounds good.
But thank you, yeah, and then, we'll get back to you. I don't wanna, I mean, I wanna keep moving it along faster than not, so,
Good deal. All
yeah.
right.
Appreciate it, Gerald.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.